Go, Sarah.
Welcome to the Land Down Under Hangout, which is a book club, media club. We consume books, we consume graphic novels, movies, and then we talk about it and then go off track. So welcome. This month's pick was my pick, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Naomi will now hold up a coffee and we'll say words. Hello. So the camera moves to her.
Coffee.
Thank you very much. This was my pick, and I was really pleased after picking for the last 2 years duds. I feel like I'm finally vindicated, and I personally had a really good time with it. But I have so many notes. So for me, it was a 5-star read, except listen. I did the audio book on Audible by Ray Porter. Ray Porter also narrated the Bobiverse books and also a couple of others by Dennis E. Taylor. So I knew I was in for a good time. I can recommend it. And after reading The Martian and then Artemis, I feel like he's back on track. Andy Weir's back on track with this one. I have nearly finished my 3rd listen through of it since I started it back in January. There's just so many good memorable parts, and I wanted to make sure I was fresh for it. So yeah, 5-star read for me. Let's hear from somebody else. I'm gonna throw over to Naomi, who's so fresh off with this.
So I finished it an hour and a half ago. Ish. I half listened and half read. So I read some of the physical book and listened to it while I was at work. I really enjoyed it. Both reading it and listening to it were really enjoyable, which sometimes doesn't happen for me. Sometimes I will much prefer one version over the other, whether it be reading either the physical or digital like word copy or listening to it. But both were really enjoyable. I did find that I probably got more out of listening to it because because there is that musical language, you actually get to hear some of that, which is really interesting to hear. But both, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Thank you, Sarah, for picking it.
Thank you, Naomi. Naomi, you throw it to somebody else. That's the rule. You have to throw it to somebody else after.
Karina.
I knew you can do that. I really, really enjoyed it as well. I read it rather than listen to it because listening's not happening for me at the moment. And yeah, I was worried that the maths and science were going to be too maths and sciencey for me, but you could sort of get away with glossing through those bits because I don't science and none of it made any sense to me whatsoever. But you could gloss through it and still get the gist of the story, which is really, really nice. Yeah, no, thoroughly enjoyed it. Really glad you picked it, Sarah. I'm going to throw to Matt because he's next to me.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed this too. It was a welcome return to form for Andy Weir, as far as I'm concerned, after Artemis being the last one of his that I read. So I don't know if it was necessarily the next book he wrote after Artemis, but it's the one that I've read most recently after that. So yeah, back to sciencing the shit out of stuff again. I think I still enjoyed The Martian slightly more for reasons that I can probably talk about later. I only really had 2 kind of minor quibbles with the story, but they didn't really affect my enjoyment that much. So yeah, I had a good fun time and yeah, enjoyed it a lot.
I knew you were going to point to me. I friggin' loved this book so much. I was so excited when Sarah picked it because I'd already read it once and I was like, yay, I get to read it again. Is it perfect? No. Did I have to suspend my disbelief on multiple occasions? Yes. Do I care? No. And in case anybody's watching this that hasn't read the book, we will be spoiling it. So, you know, be ready because this is
yeah.
the book I would.
I
normally not a huge. I don't normally worry too much about spoilers, but I think this one's a good one to go in cold. So having said that, my favourite character, Rocky, was fantastic, and I just loved him so much, and I just want to read him again and again and again. Mel, I'm interested to know what you thought of the giant spider alien.
Who are we going to?
You.
Oh, sorry. I could have sworn you said Matt, and I was like, no, that
I
doesn't sound
I
right.
thought you said Matt too.
Yeah, okay, so
Sorry,
it
I
was
said
just me.
Mel. I want to know what you thought of the giant spider alien.
That makes
Well,
more sense.
We'll get
Yeah,
maybe
it
we'll
does.
get into more detail later, but
Yeah, we'll talk about the giant spider alien later. But yes, we will say there is love in my heart for Rocky, despite his appearance. And honestly, I had a really good time with this one. Such a good time. Nye and I listened to this together, so my husband and I listened to this together. And we had such a good time that he was like, gosh, that narrator was good. And I was like, well, have I got a series for you? And we're doing Bob Verse next.
I'm so glad
Oh,
to hear
Daisy
that.
Potter!
I'm so glad to hear that Nye read it because I'm pushing Ben to read it.
He totally did. Has Ben read The Martian?
No.
Oh my God, Nye's obsessed with both of them now. He loves them so much. In fact, I mentioned to Nye that this one's already been optioned for a film, and it's got Ryan Gosling tied to it, and he was like, oh my God, yes. So pretty excited in this house. So yeah, I had a good time with it. I thought it was good. Similar things. I gave it 4 stars overall. I think that the wow factor is a little less there because we had The Martian already, and this follows a lot of formula along those lines, but that's okay because it's still a good time. I'm going to throw to Liv.
I loved it. I loved Rocky. Oh my God. I'm going to talk about Rocky for days. Anyway, as someone who actually didn't like The Martian that much, I think it's because I listened to the audiobook. I know you guys will crucify me for that. But
Wait, which version of the audiobook? Who was the narrator?
I have no
Darcy
idea.
Bray or Will Wheaton?
What? No, Will Wheaton was one of the narrators. I didn't know he knows.
Yeah,
done
he's
them
the
all
new Audible one
I don't
because
think
they
it
don't
was
have the
Will
rights.
Wheaton.
Yeah, it might have been Will Wheaton. I hear he's done a good job, but RC Bray did the original, and they wouldn't keep paying. Pillion, I think the name is Pillar. They wouldn't keep paying for the rights. Anyway, back to you, Liv.
Sorry.
Yeah. And as someone who generally doesn't read a lot of sci-fi, it goes over my head. I'm generally not that interested in it. I will gladly say this really raised the bar for me, and I loved it. And I actually cried at the end, but we'll get to that. So, Bobby.
Space Buddies. I loved it. It was like, yeah, I liked it a lot. It was really good. I read it over Christmas, and I was having a bit of a hard Christmas, so it was really nice. I did have to keep going back to my partner and be like, nothing bad's gonna happen, right? Because it would kind of ramp up, and I'm like, it's getting too good. They're too happy. Something's gonna happen, and it's gonna ruin it. And he's like, no one's gonna die. Like, just keep going. So yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed it. I'm someone who actually quite likes hard science fiction for the most part, and I did find myself kind of like my eyes sort of would gloss over as he was doing the math out loud. I think it would have helped if I had had like visuals, because I find with math with a big math is better for me with visuals. So I was sort of like, oh, because I was doing the audiobook, but I really enjoyed it a lot. And David's been rereading it, and so I've been quite happy to re-listen to it over and over again. I think it's gonna be one of those where, like, if I want a comfort read, I will definitely go back to it. I have to send to someone. Who else hasn't got? Elizabeth.
It was fine.
I was waiting for it. I was
waiting for this.
It was entertaining and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't brilliant. It was just fine. I had a few quibbles with it. I loved Rocky, but mostly it was just fine. I should also say this is my first Andy Weir novel. I have not read The Martian, although it is on my pile to get to. So yeah, and I'm just bypassing Artemis entirely, which from the sounds of it is the correct choice.
Mhm.
I think that's everyone.
I think so.
I believe so.
Great.
Good hangout, guys. All right.
Okay, so I thought I'd open with that. I didn't know that this was a first contact story. I
No.
went into this completely cold, which I'm super, super glad about. So I basically read the summary and went, oh, cool. Guy alone in space again. That's his thing. I'm okay. It's getting really good. Like, I just don't want to know anything else. I'll give it a go. It's getting really good ratings. The scene where the blip A turns up, we were driving back from it was like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then we would go back to the past, and I was like, no, I want to know what happens. And then and then we come through the future. I'm like, no, what's going on with Strat? So I thought I enjoyed the back and forth pacing, and I think what you were saying, Kirsten, which is this is a really good one to go into cold, and I'm going to be really interested to see what a production studio does with it, because I think that the power comes from that. This is a first contact story, but it's I don't know, there's something about it that often with these things, I don't know why in my head I kept thinking, so often when it gets to meeting the aliens, it's always a letdown, or it's always like it's never as good as what the mystery was. The mystery is always all encompassing, and then you get into the next part. But this was a mystery that kept taking different routes. It was different mysteries to solve along the way, which I'm here for, So I wondered if anyone else was also unaware or tried to be unaware that it was a first contact. Yeah, and I thought it was so much more enjoyable for it. Like that whole blip A stuff, I really loved.
Can I just say, like, as someone who has recently been battling with pantry moths and bugs in my pot plants, it was a really sensible choice to start with the pests.
Yes.
and have that as your first contact, and then move on to other aliens. That was really smart.
Mm.
Oh, in fact, even at that point where they discovered astrophage. Yeah, and that was sort of their first discovery of alien life and everything. I was really enjoying it. We didn't need the Rocky bit at that point. I was quite happy with the story at that point, because I was just like, yes, because it's very likely if we discover life outside of Earth, it won't be sentient. And so I was just sort of really riding that high of excellent choices and stuff. And then we got Rocky and I was in love. So it's okay.
Yeah, so it sounds like lots of others weren't aware this was a first contact in different ways.
I had to be so good and not tell Matt, because I was like, I wanted to talk about how much I loved Rocky, and I was like, hold your tongue.
Where are you up to?
That was what I did all the
What I did to her. What are you up to? What are you up to? She got
because I didn't want to accidentally slip and say something that he hadn't gotten to yet. And I was like,
Yeah, then it'd be like, oh, you're only up to that.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to meet Rocky. I was like, when are you going to get to that bit?
I must admit, that's one of the best
pages showed up, and I'm like,
I must admit that's one of the best bits. Nye and I listened to it together, was that we got to be just like the whole time together. It was really good.
Yeah, and the whole robot that waved, it was just like this build up was so good, and then the hexes on the wall, like the scenes were so sort of the mystery and development was just really very enjoyable for me anyway. And that whole thing where it was like he's a spider, it was, but it was also really interesting because of how Weir had thought about another species and what the world of Erid was, and how that would affect how a species would develop there, and the fact that they used hard metals and that their base numbers and all of that. I loved all of that. The musical thing was really cool, and I'll be really interested. Like, I really loved the way they handled that, and when that happened in the audiobook, I went, huh?
yeah, it was great in the audiobook.
I was like, did I just hear? And then Rylan going, was that what I thought it was? It was very cool. So, and I very much enjoyed it.
Question for those people who actually read either the ebook or the physical book. How did they represent those points when Rocky was talking with musical notes?
Musical notes.
Yeah. Ah,
I actually
nice.
when I first listened to it, because we didn't have a word copy. Matt's got the ebook now, but I actually went into a bookshop and looked in the book because I was like, I want to know how they did it in the book. Because I was really curious, and I think it worked so well in the audiobook, especially later when you've got the translation but you still had the musical part overlaid with it. It was really, really well done. I was really impressed with it, and I actually ended up saying to Matt, like, just listen to this audiobook of how they do it, because I just thought it was really cool.
It was really cleverly done with the like notes or like underneath the words, so that you still knew that it was like him making the musical notes, but you had the like translation over the top. It was really clever.
Yeah. It's very cool.
Isn't that funny that so many of us do like alternate between audiobooks and written books? That like Mel wanted to know how they did it in the physical book, and my immediate reaction when Naomi was half listening to it was, how did they do the music thing in the audiobook?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, for me, I was always going to do the audiobook. The moment I saw it was Ray Porter, I was just, well, that's I'm going to have to do the audiobook, because he's just does the Bobiverse, and he's done a couple of other books by Denise Taylor, and I was just like, I'm in.
Did you take a second? I was like, it's not Bob. It's not Bob, because I found that Ryland reminded me of Bob a little bit.
They're white middle-aged computer guys, right? Like
it's science dudes.
And I think that Weir and Port, I keep saying Dennis Taylor. That's not Porter. Ray Porter, Dennis Taylor. I think they actually know each other through the science circles. Like, you hear about them sending each other, like all those people who are amazing and write stuff. But yeah, it did take a moment for that, but at the same time, I've listened to Ray Porter narrate other stuff, and it's also very similar. I think it's also, once you start meeting other characters, you kind of,
it helps.
it helps. Yeah.
Naomi?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I didn't realize that it was the same voice actor when I first started listening to it, and the whole time I'm like, why does this remind me of Bob?
You didn't realize until I told you this afternoon, because Kirsten told me today.
Wow. I was like, the whole time I'm like, this really sounds like the same guy that does Bob, but it can't be him. It can't be the same person. Like, the whole time I was like, it can't be. It's just because they're like, they seem like very similar characters. Like, they're both middle-age-ish white men. They have that sort of bumbling quality to them. Like, it didn't occur to me, like, I just thought they were just two white dudes that sounded very similar. Like, that racist?
I think they are, though, at the same time.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just thought that the voice actors were just two dudes that sounded similar. Didn't occur to me that they were probably the same person. Like, and then I said to Karina, they really sound the same, and she's like, it's because they are the same. And I'm like, yeah.
In fact, Nye was commenting on what a good job Ray Porter does on female voices. We were talking about the fact that so many male narrators do a very poor job when they do female voices, and
they just try and do a falsetto, and he wasn't trying to do a falsetto. He just literally lifted his voice up. He wasn't like trying to talk like this. He lifted his voice up. That's all we need.
Yeah. He was one of the characters for Shauna Maguire in her Encrypted series, and he did all the female voices. But that was a really long time ago, so I think he's probably been given some direction on that or something. He's got a lot better. He was a lot better in this book.
Sarah, how did you feel about the New Zealand accent?
It was good. I have all the characters that I want to talk about written down. Rocky, but maybe we'll get back to Rocky. So Dmitri, the Russian dude, I fucking loved him. I was just like, awesome. And I had this guy in my head, and I just keep imagining this guy, and I can't think. I keep going, who is this actor I keep seeing in this role? So I really liked Dmitri. He just was very, very funny. And Aluk, like, I can hear it in my head, and I can't say it out loud. She was very funny. She was, and that's a good example of, he didn't make her voice, she was quite, gruff and like, she was very funny. And Bob, the New Zealander, was actually very good, and he actually did a really good job on the prison guard. Actually, when we first went in, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, that's well done." So I thought that was
choice words in there.
yeah. Well, he said weapons, which is how you would, so not weapons, but weapons, because you just basically butcher all the vowels in New Zealand.
I was actually wondering if perhaps they had enough budget for this, that they were able to get someone who was from New Zealand to actually say the lines for him to work from.
Probably. I mean, and there's probably different people that they can look at. There's other accents I wasn't sure about whether the Thai doctor was particularly Thai. I wouldn't have been able to comment on that, whether that was, compared to other Asian style accents. The Canadian guy was really fun. That whole scene cracked me up.
Yeah.
It's just like, I was like, this kid's on poppers. This is very funny. Then there was Strat, who was correct. Was she Dutch? Danish.
So
I get the two confused sometimes, not because they're also right next to one another.
No, I think she was Dutch.
Dutch, yeah. I'm not sure how Dutch that accent was, but I thought the way he delivered Strat, and she's a character, a very interesting character to talk about. I thought, you just kind of got over that, and you could really imagine her. So that was kind of cool. And there was just so many others we met along the way, which was really good. He did the kids, that was great. But yeah, so I thought he did a great job on all the different, because there was so many different accents to have to do with different characters. And the thing I was actually going to comment on was I actually re-listened to The Martian after my second listen through. I listened to The Martian, and I have to say that especially because I did the audiobook was R.C. Bray's version, and then I've done this one with Ray Porter. Andy Weir's writing, and this is what Mel will totally know because she's the one who told me about this, has definitely come a long way when it comes to conversations, because I noticed the whole, I think you call it the John Scalzi, he said, she said issue.
Yeah.
Right. So The Martian, as it turns out, has a lot of that. It's really distracting.
It does. It's nowhere near as bad as Red Shirts, though. So
but it's like listening to The Martian after listening to, and like going, oh wow, he has picked like the author has picked up his game as far as I have to have a rapid fire conversation. How do I deliver this in a way that it's not like he said, she said, he said, like, so that exactly who's talking and whether. To
be fair, John Scalzi's actually talked about that particular issue and has actually done like a whole thing in the community that's around that side of things, and about the fact that when writers are writing now, they need to be writing not just for the written format, but also the audio format as well. So he has actually acknowledged and talked about that side of things quite deliberately, and with his blog, he's written things and stuff.
Well, sorry, John Scalzi, if you happen to be watching. It's just the only reference I knew of it. So when I was listening to The Martian, I really noticed that, and I thought it was interesting, and maybe a note for Elizabeth that the writing in this has definitely come along from The Martian. Not that The Martian isn't great, it's just I think that the nuance he puts into how is this still being delivered, why is this being delivered, is the character doing something else at the same time. So I definitely noticed that kind of stuff. Do we want to talk about Rocky or Strat first?
Sarah, how about you let's talk about the things you talked about. You talked about like 15 things then. You didn't get attention. Why words? You let us talk in between stuff.
Let's talk about like another minor character. I want to I forgot their names, but it's the guy who Ryland ended up replacing, who was supposed to be
Dubois.
What was it?
Dubois.
Yeah,
that person. I remember that whole conversation when he's with the girl and they're going, oh, we did this and all of that, and like Ryland's just so, oh, no, you don't need to go into so much detail. No. I was just like laughing.
That is one of the best scenes in the entire thing. And if you had the pleasure of listening to the audiobook, it was hilarious.
But the way he talks is so like, it's just, yeah, It's great. It's
Yeah,
great.
he's very like just proper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
He's a primary school teacher.
No, the guy.
Dubois.
No, Dubois.
Right, that's a Dubois. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
Dubois is-
no,
Just
yeah.
like,
Dubois is very
Sheldon from Big
Dr.
Bang Theory.
Shapiro and I have started sexual relations. It's like, okay.
And then she comes back from the bathroom and she's like, after this, we've got a space. Do you want to go to the bathroom and have sex? He's like, yes, I do.
But where he says, yes, Dr. Shapiro, that sounds great. Okay, we're moving on. You call her Dr. Shapiro? Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that bit was great too.
Whatever makes you happy, whatever floats your boat.
I feel like that's one of the things that he really got right in this book compared to Artemis. And I'm sorry for those people who haven't read Artemis. From The Martian. The Martian was quite funny. Artemis didn't feel funny to me at all. And then this one, I feel like he really sort of went, comedy is part of my roots. It's not just the science. And he really sort of engaged with that and got it right. So
I actually did not enjoy that particular part of the plot.
With the comedy.
No, with the two science officers. It kind of leaned into like the horror trope of killing off the people having sex. Like, first of all, why was that needed? As a red herring for getting rid of them, it did not it did not sit well with me.
We knew from the start of the book that both of them were going to die before it like went off. Like, we knew that they were both going to die or something was going to happen that meant that he was on the ship, and we knew that kind of from the beginning. It wasn't kind of a surprise that something was going to happen to kill at least one, not all, both of them off. So
Do you think there were definitely some, very convenient things that had to happen for Ryland to end up on the ship? And there's, like I said at the beginning, I had to suspend disbelief a lot of the time, because like, really, that he would have been, anyway, I didn't care. Like, I was like,
to be fair,
this feels very contrived so that he can be on the ship, and I don't care anyway, because
the person that would have been giving them the who gave them the astrophage, who gave them the 1 milligram rather than the 1 nanogram. Like, if you're not a science person, you probably don't realize like nanograms aren't really something you use unless you're in science. Like, they're
not
only
just that, but they made that point about it's such a small amount that it's very easy if it's been mislabeled or whatever to mess up.
To respond to Elizabeth, I mean, and of course that's your experience and your opinion, that it's warranted, and I actually think you're right. I think it actually is a deliberate horror trope, to be honest, because listening to it a second and third time, he is like in a horror film, dropping hints the entire time, such on the nose things about, like Dubois and Shapiro talk actually about how they're going to die, or it's talked about like, and once you've listened to it once or read it once, you're kind of going, oh wow, hint there, just like in a horror film. So I do wonder if it was kind of deliberate, like as you said, like it sort of felt like it was a horror film trope, and maybe it was set up that way.
I don't think it was meant to be a punishment for them for having sex, though. I think the having sex was the convenience of having them be in the same place at the same time. Like, how they went into that whole thing about they can't be on a plane together and they can't be traveling together, and to keep them apart. And then it's like, well, the reason they were together is because they were sleeping together, and
they were doing an experiment together.
Exactly.
He was testing a fail-safe on the engine, and she was there to like watch him do it. I don't think it had anything to do with the fact they were having sex. And that was the first thing I thought of, actually, was why did she go with him when there are all these fail-safes about the fact that they're not supposed to be in any sort of dangerous situation at the same time, and he's playing with astrophage, like the thing that they know is like really freaking dangerous if you get anything wrong. Like, why did why was that allowed? Like, there are all these, like, you can't be in a car together, you can't be doing this together, can't be doing this together, but yet they can go play with like this thing that they don't really know how it works.
Deus Ex Machina.
It's that's what I said. Yeah, like there's so many things that if you think about it too hard, it's like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But it was meant to be a fun ride, and I don't think you're meant to take it too seriously. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's
It's
very
tone
cheesy.
deaf. It's really tone deaf, and like it also plays into like killing off everyone except the white American man. Like very tone deaf at best.
I will admit that he definitely writes white.
I did wonder actually though whether like American white man, he went with that as the focus character because he had such a horrendous reaction to Artemis, who I think was a female character.
I would say so. I would say so.
I was just going to say
100%.
that he definitely is he writes himself. He's not great at making up, like writing from a different perspective, especially as the main character.
Yes.
And the Martian, he's already said is like the main character is him. And in this, he was like, I made the person slightly different to me. And it's like, yeah, not really that much different though, because it's obviously, he's just not very good at writing from somebody else's perspective. So I think the reason.
It's also because you're also inviting criticism. If you're inviting from another's perspective, especially a perspective that is, I kind of get it. You're told to write what you know, and your own perspective and write, and there is danger in that. He gave it a go. He got criticized for it heavily. He didn't do a good job on it. So he's gone back to what he knows. There is a risk in it. And there is a risk certainly when you're a white man writing as if you know somebody else's perspective. Like if he was writing as a black woman, that would be so tone deaf as opposed to being, who he is.
So you're going to get criticism no matter what you write. Like, obviously, I'm leveling criticism at him for writing yet another white American man. So, I don't feel like that's necessarily an excuse.
I think he's writing this because it was going to work. He knew what he was doing and he wanted to make money, and he knew that it worked well the first time, so why not stick with it? Because I got really heavily criticized for the second one.
I think also
Artemis.
He came up with the idea of, I want this guy to be the last one alive on this ship. I want him to be the only one on the ship. And I think he did make an effort to try to include people of different, cultures and stuff in the story. But he had to contrive in some way to have Ryland be the last one on the ship because that's what he wanted, He wanted that. I reckon when he was sat down to write it, his first thought was, it's going to be this one dude stuck on a ship by himself. And then he wrote the rest of it around getting him to that point. And I don't think I think the reason that things had happened the way they did is because he just needed it to get him by himself on that ship. And that was the main point that he wanted to get to.
Okay, sure. Next question. Why make Rocky male gender?
Yeah, that was one of the things that annoyed me. Because I was like, well, technically Rocky isn't male. Technically Rocky is gender neutral. And
he should have been
the only thing I can think is that Ryland does seem like the kind of dude that would just assume male, because I feel like that kind of does fit with his character. There was some other things that he said that I was like,
he gave his tanks as breeder tanks pronouns as well.
I was like, he kind of, I wouldn't surprise me that Ryland would the kind of person that would go, well, I don't know this person's gender, so I'm going to assume they're male. And but that graded me wrong because technically Rocky is not male. Rocky is hermaphrodite. So
yeah, his first name.
What?
Ryland.
I know.
I call him Ryland too. I don't like calling him Grace.
I think I've done both, and I'm not sure why. But yes, that did annoy me as well as Elizabeth. It was one of the things that I was like,
It's just part of an overall pattern with the book, which is why, like, even though I found it quite entertaining, it wasn't like, it was probably only like a 3-star read for me.
did I miss anyone complaining about how he knew too much science?
Oh,
Yes. Oh my God, especially for a high school teacher.
Which is why I like Mark Watney better, because all the science he did was based around the things that he either knew about or the things he was trained to do as an astronaut.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, he's like, I wrote a paper once, and then I did some astronaut training, and now I know shit about everything.
And then Strat just brings him into every meeting and basically makes him 2IC
Second
for why. We don't know. Again, it was a contrivance to get this guy on the ship. Like,
Oh, no,
there was
I
a lot of
assumed straight
suspension
up.
of disbelief in this book, and
Straight
I
up from the
chose to do
beginning,
it.
I was very certain she picked him on purpose. She kept him around only because she knew that I was like, we already know, she knows that he's a match. He's genetically a match. She's not telling him, but she's keeping him around as a
That
first,
did not happen. So the match thing, the Thai doctor didn't test them until she'd had him around for months at that point.
No, but I was figuring she was keeping him around for safe, like for a plan B safety net. Like she was just keeping him around because to her he was a bit dispensable, but like he was a pushover. She could do whatever she wanted and he'd just do it. And everyone else she's having a fight with.
Yeah, I also just thought it was probably more along the lines of she was just keeping him around because he was, I don't know, some people were kind of found a bit more friendly than her. Because she was doing what she needed to do. And, you know, if someone needed to deliver bad news and be a little bit more sympathetic or empathetic, then she needed someone who could do that. And as a junior high school teacher who deals with a lot of emotions from 13-year-olds, it's probably not a bad fit for that kind of role.
True. I did have a couple of quibbles with the science too, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm surprised everyone's nodding. The first thing that got me was that when he sees the star of Tau, and he notices about the sunspots moving at different speeds to what he would expect from Sol. I was a bit taken aback that he would immediately assume that it was a different star when you have astrophage and you don't actually know how scientifically they're affecting our star, and whether, you know, that might have been an issue.
There were a lot of things like that. Yeah.
And then they didn't account, like, and then Rocky builds his extensions on the ship, right? And they make a comment about like how much heavier the ship must be after he's brought all his stuff over, right? But they never address how it affects the centrifuge, because you've got all this additional weight in one side, and they haven't put a counterbalance on the other side that they've mentioned. So I was just a bit like
I said, there's a lot of suspending disbelief. Like, there's also like when they first meet and he's like, why is it all oxygen? Why is it not mostly nitrogen in there anyway? And then that kind of was important later when the nitrogen was the thing that killed the Talmud, because if he had been breathing an oxygen nitrogen mix like we do, then that wouldn't have happened, because when it escaped it would have died.
Yeah, I had to look that up actually.
Why would you
how did it get out?
Have pure oxygen when that just makes things go on fire really easily, and it's a bad idea? Like,
they do actually have a high oxygen rich thing in the space station.
But is it all oxygen?
No.
Like, how much nitrogen? Yeah.
It's actually
anyway, there were a lot of things that I just chose not to pay attention to because I didn't care, because I just wanted, like I said to Matt, I could just read 1,000 pages of just Ryland and Rocky hanging out together. And I just want to listen to them tell each other about their cultures. And I don't give a fuck about anything else except like the buddy cop, those guys hanging out together thing. And like all the other stuff that I just had to go, yeah, really? He learned that language that quick?
Yeah.
That was definitely like suspension of disbelief. I was like,
and like he mentions earlier on, I'm not that musical. And I'm like, I'm not that musical, and I can tell you right now I would not have learnt that language by being able to listen to it. If he'd used the computer the whole time, I would have been fine with that. But he's just like, oh, I just got used to it and learnt it. And I'm like, really?
That is how language acquisition works. Whenever that's the only way you can talk, I can tell you that. Like you take someone who has very little understanding, like they understand kind of how language works for whatever reason. Like because they maybe, if he's a teacher, he's probably, particularly in the public school system, he would have had some foreign language experience. So he would have already understood a bit about that. He's probably picked up a few words here and there working with other people, like the other astronauts. If you are in a situation where the only way you can communicate with someone, and it is dire, is you have to pick up their language. Yeah, it works that fast.
But with music,
would be-
though, like if you're not,
Even
like
with music.
someone who's
No,
not
even with music,
musical.
because you'll get people who will go to India, who will go to Thailand, who will go to China, which is all tonal, and they pick it up really fast whenever that's the only thing they have to go off of. He's not
I'd be
talking to
willing
anyone
to
else in
accept
English.
it if it had been a month, but it was a week.
No, it will work that fast.
Oh,
So aside from the fact that like some of the stuff, maybe not as much, but the basic things that he would use a lot. So the question words, figuring out those things, the fact that they're using a lot of repetitiveness, if you listen to it, there's not a lot of grammatical variation. It's very simplistic grammar. There's a lot of vocabulary, but very simplistic grammar. That's really common for someone who goes and goes into an immersive program for 2 weeks. They will come back being able to, they will triple their vocabulary before they triple their grammar understanding. That's very normal. I actually thought that was quite understandable compared to the amount of science that he seemed to understand. That was much more believable. That was way more believable than the other thing. And especially when they moved in together and they were having to deal all together, like he was living with him all the time. It's the only person he had to talk to. Yeah, it was believable.
That's nice to hear.
Anyway.
I was like, yeah, really? All right. But maybe that's just because I'm really bad at languages and I'm like,
if your life depended on it, I bet your brain would figure out how to make it work.
but that's, I think, the thing with the computer. I reckon that it'd be because he had that translator basically by building that program, that it'd be easy to rely on that instead of making yourself learn it by hearing.
Yeah, but he was doing practice. He did say he wanted to get off it. He wanted to practice, and he was. I get it that he's faced with someone who has. What did Rocky say? He said, something is just processes, and then memory is just storage. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. He's got someone who just goes, oh yeah, you taught me that word. I remember it forever. I'm like,
I love the fact that Rocky uses their word for the word grace, as in meaning graceful, for grace. And he must be like, who the fuck named you? Because you're the least graceful person.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Because like his name, like from that perspective, it's just a noun. It's grace. Like, but they've ended up with, a different understanding of grace in that regard. I'm like, how'd they get to that? Did they have a discussion about his surname and what that means outside of the context of just being surname?
This is why I say I could read thousands of pages of this, because I just want all these conversations where I want the conversation where Grace explains to Rocky about restaurants, because I feel like Rocky would be horrified. It cracks me up. And you think about every celebration that humans have revolves around food and sitting together and eating together. In all different cultures, humans do this thing. And Rocky would be like, why? It'd be like if someone told you, oh, we just get together and go to the toilet together. and it just, I'm like, why was that not a conversation? And why was there no conversation where where Grace shows Rocky what human music sounds like, and I want to know what he thinks about
it. Was the biggest one for me. I was like, why you freaking talked about the Beatles. You could have sung the song. Was it just too confusing to
played
explain?
one song for him, and it was all like, these people are just swearing constantly, turn it off.
Yeah, but I wanted that scene.
No,
we got an unnecessary scene with Strat in a courtroom. Why couldn't we got that? Why couldn't we got that
Especially
scene?
In the scene when they were doing the celebration, when he gets drunk and Rocky comes out with all his, that I love that too, when Rocky came out with all his decorations and stuff. Why didn't they put music on then? That was the perfect moment for him to put on some kind of music as a celebration. And I was pissed that they didn't have that happen somewhere.
I presume it would be like hearing a lot of random words or jargon, like somebody, that's what I think it probably would have sounded like to Rocky, is like, why are there just syllables? People are just saying that, like, random made up. That would probably what it would be like. But I wrote a note on that going, how did I get to the end of this book and they never talked about music? How did that never come up?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, if their language is based on, like, essentially musical tones, but they obviously enjoy, like, making sound, that's a pleasurable thing. Like, the kinds of sounds that they make for pleasure would not be musical tones, because it would just get, like, too crazy mixed up with their speech, like their language. So it'd have to be like, are they into rhythm? Like, just,
maybe.
bash shit.
But yeah, these are the questions that I had, and I was like, I need to know more about this. I want more.
Interspecies relations.
But not like that.
Well, that would end badly for both of them.
I'm just going to add in a fist my bump at this stage.
Or fist me. Which the vaginal fantasy cohort and me just laughed out loud, going, "Oh yeah, remember that book, guys?"
Yeah,
it was very funny. Naomi's not here to remember that with me, because that was hilarious. Nella's though. You remember that one?
I remember
that. Yeah. Do we want to get the rest of Elizabeth's quibbles out of the way?
No, please.
Fest?
I'm happy to go back to discussing characters, because I know you are keen to talk about Strat.
Let's talk about Strat.
Yes.
So, interesting character, because you know nothing about her, basically.
Yeah, there's no personal information on her at all.
Yeah. Did the history thing at the end come as a surprise to anyone, or did it feel
Not
like
to anyone who has an arts degree? It only comes as a surprise to people who are science people.
So
I'm surprised by it. I was like, that makes sense.
I've had 2 shots of vodka. Can someone explain what we're talking about right now?
So at the end, when Ryland's been put in a small prison cell waiting to be made unconscious and hauled up to the Hail Mary, Strat explains that the world's wars have been waged over food.
Yeah.
From her discoveries and learnings.
Yes.
And that the world was preoccupied with making food for a long time, up until the Industrial Revolution, and that she was basically a history major, and that's sort of directed her in the direction she's gone. So
the only argument I had with that particular thing is that I would have expanded it from food to resources. Food 100% is part of that, but resources has often been a drive just as much. So Japan going into Manchuria is very much more about resources than food. They were able to produce food for themselves, but they weren't able to produce resources that they needed, mining, things along those lines. So I would just want to expand it a little bit. I don't disagree with her in theory, though.
Yeah, I think, and there's some interesting stuff happening in the world at the moment where it's also over identity and that type of stuff. So
and it's also nowadays it's about politics. Hello, Ukraine and Russia right now, but
sometimes still,
which is about identity and how and but I thought so let's talk about Strat. And I mean, and then sort of an unnecessary antagonist, do we think? Sorry, not unnecessary, but necessary antagonist.
I understand why people might have a negative view of Strat, but honestly, in the end, she was doing what had to be done, and sometimes that required some ruthlessness, and that included what happened with Grace. I think in the end that's very unfortunate, but the fact of the matter is that she was in a circumstance. One of the things that's really well known when it comes to leadership in military situations, this is military, no matter what anybody wants to say about it, it's a military circumstance where you are essentially at war. It's not a country that you're at war with, it's a microbe, but it's still at the end at war to save your people. And so her job was to make hard calls, to make things happen. And that's what she was doing. And it wasn't always pretty. And in this case, for Grace's situation, it was really ugly, but it was what she had to do. But overall, though, up until that point, I thought she was an extremely enjoyable character, doing what, and I was really enjoying that. And that was the only point that put into question. But when you sort of thought about it, and when I sort of broke it down that way, I was like, she did what she had to do, no different than anything else.
The biggest
It was
issue
always there. It was always there. Like it was going, like she'd made hard decisions the whole time. So it was leading, like we'd gone from, I actually made a note on that where the whole discussion, it's like, it's not like that. And them staring at one another. Okay, it's exactly like that. Like I really enjoyed that, those kind of that back and forth. But it was always going to end that way. But I wondered why others thought about those two end scenes, the one where he goes and says he's not going, and then the one where she goes into the cell, and what others thought.
I was more pissed at him than I was at her, because we'd gotten to know him for all this time, and it's like you know that it's better for humanity that you go and not some person that doesn't really know anything that's only just been brought in, and you're still saying no, and it shit me. I was really cranky at him, especially on the reread, because that scene with him and Rocky where Rocky's like, you know, telling him about how he volunteered, and he's like, you know, basically he says to him, you're a good person. And then when you get to that bit, like, or even rereading it, I was like, he's not that good a person because he had to be forced to go there, and I'm pissed at him that he didn't just go. And like, I
struggled to be really pissed with him for the simple fact that I was like, I'm not sure that I would have been okay with
thing,
it.
like, it's all well and good for people to be mad the fact that this person who has a skill set didn't want to get on a one-way ticket to death, but like, how many people would do the same? Like, yeah, okay, you can say now when you're not in that situation, no, I would totally go to the end of the world and be able to save humanity, blah blah blah. But like, if you were in that situation, like, could you really say that, yeah, I'd be happy to go on a one-way ticket on a spaceship and know that I'm going to die and have to pick my own way of death? Like,
oh my god, that element.
And he didn't get a lot of time to process that either. He literally got told, "You're going, bye-bye." Like,
yeah,
this is happening.
I as someone who suffers anxiety, I kind of had myself in his shoes and going, like, when he said everybody got into a room and decided what was happening to me, you know, that's the circles of control. It's something you were talking about, Bobby, today, is like, what's in your control? And he's given this piece of control back, and it's like the fear of that, of something that you're not prepared for in any way, shape or form, that you're being told you get a choice. I'm not saying it's like the right thing, but under the circumstances, I just was like, that feeling, like, it must have been vomit inducing fear and anxiety to have been given that kind of choice, and or not really being given a choice. Like, that would have been just awful.
See, that's the thing, is I honestly, when I read it the first time, and I mean, I wasn't super angry with him the first time. I was like, yeah, I would be really upset. I would need a moment to panic and be really upset before I could calm down and go, yep, keep fine, I'm doing it. Like, at least I would hope that that's what I would do in that situation. Like, I can appreciate anyone needing to fall apart for a moment and realize that their life is going to end, regardless of whether or not they come to the understanding, or they come to that calm sense of, no, this is really what needs to happen. But at the same time, the second time I listened to it, because David said the same thing, he was angry with Grace, and so we listened to it again, and I was like, actually, no, and the other thing that makes me angry about that is, if I was in that situation, I would know that it was a courtesy they were asking. I wasn't actually being given a choice, which would make me more angry and less reasonable in the moment. I would, like, because, like, I was like, we know how she is. I mean, and I'm not saying that, like, that it's not appropriate in this circumstance that she makes those hard calls and she's a hard ass. No, I get it, and she should be, and I liked her character a lot. But, like, I could see it coming a mile away. She was only asking him because she assumed he would make the right decision straight up. And when he said no, she said, no, fine, I'm making the decision for you. You don't get a choice.
Yeah.
So it was never really his choice.
No.
either.
I
worst of it
actually
was
think what
he
happened
didn't
was it
even
was
get-
everybody else in that room.
Sorry, what, Naomi?
I was just gonna say the worst of it was he didn't like at the end where there wasn't even a bag of his stuff that managed to get on there. Like
Yeah.
nothing, like he was still forced on there with 5 days to go and nothing was sent up for him.
Which
like,
makes no sense because they changed the system so that
He had a uniform with his name on it. So
and
how
also
long
the
had they been
coffee
preparing?
when he ordered coffee, it came out the way he liked it as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
they've obviously gone into the system and edited and worked out. They knew what
But
his favorite
didn't
coffee was
bother,
and
like,
changed it.
packing some of his own personal effects. Like
But what
he was
personal
living on the
effects did he
base.
have though?
I mean, he was living on the base. He would have had a diary, a book, you know, there would have been things that he would have, you know, gotten with him that would have been his, that would have meant something to him. Like,
That's just
Stuff from his kids.
Thing about
Like-
that decision, well, I know it wasn't necessarily a decision, but him to say no, that he didn't want to go, it made me feel like that point where he found out that he had left Rocky and he was going back to Earth, and he realized what was going on with the thing, that what was probably going to happen to Rocky, that Rocky wouldn't be able to make it. Because you had that sort of that question before that he said no, that he wouldn't volunteer. It made me feel really scared for Rocky that he wouldn't go back.
Yep,
And
I was too. And he played into that because the next line was something like, "I'm sorry, Rocky," and I was like, "You better not. I will throw this book if you don't go back for him.
I will come for you."
Have to throw your phone.
Yeah.
True.
Look, I mean, and it's various predictable things. Like, you know, it's just like I know they're going to be okay. Do you know what I mean? Because he doesn't write books where people aren't okay. I knew that it's going to get a lot worse. It's your classic, you know, we're going to dig into all of this shit and it's going to go down and down and down and it's going to get worse and worse and then we're going to come out of it. And then there was a redemption arc. So I was also like, he's going to get redeemed. So I kind of, it's like there's a lot of formula to it, but I like the way the formulas worked, as it were.
And the reason that he's got none of his stuff on board is for plot reasons, because they need Dubois' nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
You need the what? I missed that.
They need Dubois' nitrogen.
Right,
If they had put Ryland's stuff on, they would have taken Dubois' stuff off.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, plot reasons.
It's the thing
Unfortunately,
that's the thing I was saying before. There was a lot of things that happened just because they needed to happen, because that was the way the plot was going to go. And
Ryland also didn't say how he wanted to die, so they were like, well, we'll leave that stuff just in case. And you know, what's his name, the commander can shoot him if not.
the one problem I had with the whole, like, choosing, like, him saying that he's not going to go was the way he waved the children up as a shield, like, oh, but the children, I'm like, oh my god, seriously, you went there, really?
And it was clearly
considering,
because really, if you cared about the kids, he was already talking about how he knew what, like, that was why he went back in the very first place, where he's like, I need to actually go and find the answer to this, because he knew the world's going to go to shit and these kids are going to get the worst of it. And that's the other thing that I was like, well, you were saying about making the choice to go and die, and I'm like, I don't know, I'd rather go on the spaceship and die than die in some war on Earth when there's no food and be like I just kept thinking the world's going to be like The Walking Dead, and I'd rather be on a spaceship.
Yeah, but I think that's just more of a testament of he was not thinking, he was panicking because he was the decision about his life had been made for him.
Yeah,
like a core decision.
It was more, you're right. It was more about the decision not being taken out of his hands than anything. I think that he was mostly angry about.
And I think that where he's sitting, like, he has, it all comes back to him and he's sitting there going, and it's that having that mirror held up to yourself, like, you not realize, like, we've all had those moments of going, oh, I've been that person, or I'm being that's, and I don't like that. That's like quite, tough. And so I did like how that was dealt with, where he just was sat there and he's like realizing, I'm a shithead. I was a coward. I was afraid. You know, like there's definitely valid reasons for it, but he's kind of got this mirror, and like I think actually using the kids as a shield is such an important part of showing what a shitty guy he was being in that moment, to then have that right facing him and going, oh my, you know, like it's quite, you know, I think it could even been done even more powerfully. You know, you see it quite, it's a formula, it's done all the time, but I think it works.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that pissed me off about his saying no. Not just that he said no, but that it was clearly bullshit. Like that he knew he didn't really believe that was why he was saying no, but it annoyed me. But especially because I'm like, what would Rocky think of you?
I think that's kind of the point. Like, I think that one of the things that sort of about it that was a bit unrealistic to me was the fact that he had no friends. He's a reasonably personable guy. Why does he have no friends at all? Like, that's
he does
odd.
have friends. That's how he found out about it. Like, that's what Strat said, you have no friends. It's kind of going, no, we met his friends at the beginning. He went into a bar and had a whiskey and a steak with her. Like, he had friends. They might not have been the closest of friends, but he did have some friends.
We did say at the end that he was doing drinks and meals and stuff with his work friends, and I think that maybe that was his line, that he was like, well, they're people that I work with, that I'm friendly with, but they're not really friends that I like divulge my personal life to.
Yeah, but he was certainly upset when he realized that Alukia and Commander Yao were dead. Like, he remembered who they were. He was like, well, he didn't remember, but he remembered the feeling of them. He was clearly upset by that, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm watching the cat.
He's been doing this all night. Okay, we've taken a short break. Like, can we ask Lisa, like, what was your overall opinion of the book? Because you're here.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable. I think I agree with what some other people said, that really the interactions between him and Rocky were the most enjoyable stuff in there. And yeah, very much nutting out the differences in their culture, things like, you know, no, you watch me sleep now, you know. Like that, even that, the whole the story behind the needing to be watched while sleeping. And the difference between that and the human way isn't that kind of creepy? I'm not happy that you sat there staring at me for several hours while I was unconscious. So that was just little subtle things like that I thought they were really nicely sort of done in that. There was definitely a little bit of suspension of belief with some of the plot devices. But I really did very much enjoy it. I was a little worried that because The Martian is one of my favorite books, and I was quite worried that when I started reading this book that it was like, oh, this sounds like the same voice. And I think someone mentioned that before, but it was like, oh, maybe Andy Weir can only write in his own voice, you know, so that might limit other, you know, what comes out, what other books he might put out. But overall, I did rather enjoy the book. So,
one last thing before we move on entirely from Ryland Grace's character flaws. Can we just talk about hygiene? Because food left, you know, hanging around. He's like taken some bites out of it and he's put it down and gone off to do something, and it's zero gravity, so he can just let go of it. I'm like, ew. First of all, I was kind of expecting it to come around and like be a problem, because, you know, I've read Mary Robinette Kowal and she knows her stuff in terms of science and that sort of thing, at least, but it didn't. He's just a slob.
Yeah. Maybe Bob's not for you either.
You know what? It just hit me. I think the actor that I see playing Grace is Chris Pine.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Pine. The perfect character match there. Anyway, for me anyhow. but because that's the kind of crap he would pull. He'd just leave crap things everywhere.
Yeah, I had a real, like, I know they've got Ryan Gosling, but I had more of a Ryan Reynolds
Yep.
feel
I
from.
can't see Gosling.
I can't
No,
see him
he's
either.
too
He's
kind of
too good
clean cut.
looking. He's far too good looking for
Yeah,
this role.
I did not picture this guy as good looking at all.
No, I like, sorry if you're out there, but I kept envisioning like CPG Grey, like the real CPG Grey, who's always made to look like a robot. I was just like, oh, why do I see this? You know, because he was a physics teacher. It's anyway. No, I can't see Ryan Gosling. But I was hopeful. I am hopeful that they will cast real, like, people from places. Like Strat will be a Dutch person, for instance. And
Actually, not Chris Pine. Chris Pratt, the one from the
Yeah.
Galaxy. Yeah, that one. That's
Yeah.
who I see playing this. Sorry, not Chris Pine. Chris Pine's
Sorry,
fine.
That's who I was
what you
thinking
meant.
you meant.
Sorry.
actually.
that works a bit better than Chris Pine.
Yeah, no, Chris Pine. No, we say Chris Pine. Chris Pratt. The Pratt.
I
the
thought, I
actual
thought that's who you meant, and I was
Yeah,
just
me
get
too.
all the Chris's mixed up.
The dinosaur guy.
Actually,
Yeah, the
I would
dinosaur
like
guy.
Mark Ruffalo as Ryland.
No, Mark Ruffalo's
I
too
love Mark
annoying.
Ruffalo.
He's also too
He's
old.
probably a bit old for the role. He's a bit old
I
for the
don't
role.
care.
Before
I'm not
we-
having Chris Pratt.
Sorry, Elizabeth's desperate for us to move
Before
on
we
from
go to
all
war
this.
over the Chris's, before we go to war over the Chris's, I
And the Marks.
yeah, I thought we should give David a chance to give his opinion.
Oh, hey. Big
Oh,
up.
hi. Yeah,
That's
sorry.
hilarious because you two are next to each other on my screen. You and Matt right next to each other, and Matt's like, "Oh wow!"
Yeah, sorry, I got dragged out at the last minute, so I'm running late. But yeah, I'm really torn about this book because firstly, I really like it in many ways. And secondly, I really loathe the main character, the protagonist. Just no respect for him as a human being. And it just bugged me the whole way around. Like, to start with, it's just like, okay, so you're obviously like really loving this fact that you're just like being able to solve stuff from the, you know, foundations of the universe. And I'm a bit jealous that you can just look at something and calculate like spherical geometry in your head, because there's no way. He always bugged me a bit. He's very very self-centered. I mean, at the end, he does realize that he was a complete dick, and does even regret it. And when shown exactly how he's behaved, like, he's like, wow, that's not who I want to be, and which is cool. But yeah, his character always just bugged me the whole way through. Probably partially because it's just a trope that I see every day. It's like, white guy saves the world, even though it's not said anywhere in there that he's a white guy. It's just the arrogance of the engineer going through, you know, the justification of why we use Imperial when we're about to die. That said, I think some of the harder science fiction basics of it were really good. I really loved the like the astrophage and the whole trying to actually back the science up on that. I like the fact that they didn't mess around with the orbital mechanics too much. And it's like, no, you actually can't just, you know, do that for that reason. And that was all really cool. So I really, really loved the book. And I just, yeah, I just was a bit frustrated at the lack of range. Aliens must be guy engineers as well, otherwise they can't exist. That particular bit just drove me nuts. But apart from that, really loved the book. I'm really glad that he picked up a bit after Artemis, where it turns out he can't write teenage girls.
But she wasn't a teenager.
She wasn't a
sounded
teenager.
like she was a teenager because he didn't know how to write a woman.
Right, okay.
Sorry,
see,
don't get me
this is
started on that one.
There's a whole video,
dear.
I'm sure.
Yes, I'm totally going to blame the author, not my own assumptions there. Okay, cool. Anyhow, that's what I felt about it. I really loved the book. I hated some of the stereotypes. Might be a limitation of the author's worldview, but whatever. Like, and I don't think I was necessarily meant to like the protagonist either. So, yeah, mission accomplished.
I had something I was
I was going to
scientist
say,
then, and now I
he
can't
did actually
remember
kill all the other non-engineer aliens on the ship conveniently. So they were engineers, they just still died.
I was so sad when Rocky was talking about how he's been on that ship by himself for 40 years, and then it's like, oh my
no.
Oh, it's
But
awful.
also, he didn't know how like why
they died.
Why they died.
That bit was super yeah. Did anybody else start hearing what Rocky described and went, oh fuck?
Yeah.
Everyone else knew what it was.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like,
I
that
knew
sounds like
straight
radiation
away.
poisoning.
Yep.
God, yeah.
It's like,
Cool.
what?
You
Is
can
and
learn
it does make sense that, like,
What's radiation? You don't
especially
have
because they
EM sensors.
hadn't had a space program until the astrophage. They were like, oh shit, we got to go into space now, and they just did it. So they wouldn't have, and because the atmosphere's so thick, they wouldn't have really.
It was one of the bits of science that I did like. I mean, there's lots of bits of science that I liked, but
It was
their science was based around chemistry and how, you know, molecules and atoms interact rather than all the EM stuff, which is obviously a big part of physics, especially astrophysics. But for them, just didn't really enter into the equation. Like there was no
Literally.
Exactly.
I thought it was funny
EM
about the
radiation
relativity
anytime
thing
comes
too,
to-
when he's like, why did it take less time than I thought it would? And it's like, oh crap.
Yeah. And I totally loved it. We said Rocky did not believe me. Like it was like he just would not believe me. I'm like, yeah, I get it, right?
Yeah.
I picked up on the whole time dilation and length contraction thing as well. I was like, oh dear, yeah, oops.
I
He
just
did not
remember the
know.
other thing that pissed me off about science at the beginning. How fucking long it took him to figure out that he was in space when he's like, and then he's like, I don't understand why is the gravity wrong? And I'm like, duh, because you're moving. How did you not figure that out? Like, I don't know.
Can I just confirm that the ship did an expanse thing and reversed thrust to slow down?
I assume they must have, yeah.
It must have happened. They never got spoke about because I was trying to listen for it.
No, there is one point where they talk about it. He said they had to spin the ship and decelerate the rest of the way.
Okay,
So
they did. Okay,
but only
they
once,
did.
as far as I remember.
Yeah,
yeah, because he was decelerating. That's why the gravity was different. And I'm like, but he can figure out all this other shit. He's doing like spinning shit in the air to try and work out and I'm like, you couldn't have you now know you're in space and you're like, how could there possibly be gravity when I'm in space and it's not a centrifuge? I don't know how that could happen. And I'm like, I don't know that much science, and I know it's because you're fucking moving. I don't know if it's because I've read The Expanse, but like, dude, he can work out all this other shit and he couldn't figure that part out. It annoyed me because I'm like, if I can figure it out, you should be able to, because you know a lot of stuff that I don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting.
No, it's okay. I was listening to it again today for the third time. Oh my God, the sampler scene is probably one of the most stressful things I've ever listened to. When they're going out, when he's out on the ship and hauling up the sampler.
Oh yeah.
And then, it's just so stressful. And then the whole ship giving out, it's great, but my God, it's stressful. And it's like, can it get any worse? Yes. Can it get any worse? Yes. It can't get any worse. No, it can't.
Yeah, and I was like, I was so worried that the first time I listened to it, I was so worried that Rocky was dead, and I was like, no. And then the part where he's like, I helped you out by blowing the air on you, and he's like, well, no, actually, you nearly killed me. And I was like, oh God.
My husband and I like held hands. So I am the smartest guy in the world. I'm doing this. I'm like, don't.
Once again,
I actually liked that part though, because he was like patting himself on the back about how good he was, and then it was like, actually, you fucked up, man.
Yeah. Hubris.
Yeah.
Coming to think of it, like he was like, oh well, of course they didn't develop anything to do with like radio waves when they didn't have any radiation. It's like, but they have electronics, and then I'm realizing they have electronics where it's really hot. The resistance through any metal is going to be so high, they're going to have a really hard time making a transistor. So he's like, oh, look, they haven't even got transistors yet. I'm like, fine, you try and get a single transistor working when it's a few hundred degrees and see how well you go. It actually makes sense that they don't have a high degree of electronic stuff just because of all the noise from the heat.
So cool. I was reading the rest of my notes and seeing. Okay, so I asked about the deceleration thing.
There's something else I was thinking about too.
One that bugged me. So here you go. Here's something that bugged me. The court scene was completely unnecessary and could have been completely removed. I still don't know why it's in there. I think it's to explain like why they have everything and how nobody. I'm like, but nobody really cares about like the law. Like you could have written it into something else. Like why would knowing Strat, she would never have turned up. Like it just.
Yeah.
And I can tell you why it bugged me, and I realized after I listened to The Martian why it bugged me. It's the only scene he's not in. Because everything else he's in as either in the the present time or he's with Strat or having conversations. So it's a scene where Ryland is in prison. So
which is interesting because if it's all supposed to be flashbacks of his memory.
Right.
That makes
so
sense.
that's why I kind of sit there going, that's the bit that I would have done or removed or written into somehow else to have it. Anyway, Mel had a comment about law and legalities around copyright.
No.
Well, that's what the scene was about. The scene was about copyright.
No, that's not what my comment was about at all. In fact, mostly I wanted to point out that the scene was important because it showed just how much power and Strat had, even inside of law environments. So it wasn't just that she was getting away with shit, it was that she literally had complete power under what she was doing. So that when we got to the point with what happened with Grace, where she was forcing him to go, that there was no repercussions. There was no choice. There was no way around this. This is what it was going to be. That was the point of that scene in my mind.
The thing,
I just think that without him being there, it doesn't make any sense. So he should have either been in the courtroom or it was referred to.
I thought he was in the courtroom. I could have sworn he was.
No.
That was another thing I really had to suspend disbelief about. Call me a cynic, but I can't in any way conceive that every nation on the earth, even if the earth was in danger of the complete danger, I just can't see that they would all say yes to one person having all that power. Maybe I'm just too cynical, but I just, if they were like, this is the only possible way of saving the earth, I still don't think that all the nations of Earth could do that.
This ties into the theme I wrote down.
Sorry, was that Lisa?
I agree. That was actually one point where I was like, this isn't real. Like you would have one single power that all the nations would have agreed this one person has.
That have committees.
Absolute authority, like the
Six loves committees.
She's a dungeon master, it just doesn't.
Yeah. There was a vague attempt to cover that by saying, oh well, it was a secret vote of the UN, which was like, well, of course that would get rid of all the political pressure on like international stage just there.
Yeah, but there's a whole lot of countries who ignore things that the UN want, who are in the UN.
Yeah.
I think that it all ties back to the messaging that Andy Weir likes to have, which is humanity coming together and doing big things to make things happen. And we can do this together. Like he's got this really hopeful edge to things that he writes, putting Artemis aside for all of this. And I think that's where that particular element is coming from. And he was trying to acknowledge the fact that things would go bad afterwards, obviously with the wars element that was talked about with Strat. But that's what his thing is. He likes that idea of humanity coming together to save themselves, or humanity coming together to do something good, like save Mark Watney.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I did like is when he said, "What's for you after this, Strat?" and she said, "I'll probably be in a prison." And I thought that was actually really realistic. Like if something like that happens, that I can imagine afterwards, it's like, okay, everything's falling apart. We need to point the fingers at someone and they become a scapegoat. And I can totally see that would happen.
And I think we also have to take into consideration the current climate. It's the kind of climate that everybody's in right now. We're not really in the mood as a country, as a world, for a story of the countries fighting each other. We want the kind of messaging where we can come together and fight something, given the current climate. Won't mention the things that we're talking about there.
And it's definitely that optimistic kind of sci-fi, and it's like all of the things that like I said at the beginning, that I had to suspend disbelief about, I just kind of went into it like, this book is an action movie. It's an action movie.
That's a good way of describing it.
It's like trying to think of an example of something that it's just, it's a bit cheesy, it's a bit silly, but that's not what I'm not going in here for like deep and political commentary, and I just want this just a fun ride, and I know what I'm getting into here, that it's just going to be.
You don't want fine dining.
Independence Day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Independence.
One of my favorite movies.
I'm gonna head off.
High five, Sarah.
Or a Men in Black. Like, it's that kind of level of just silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why when they make a movie, it'll be a good movie.
Well, I actually wanted to say I really don't want it to be a movie. I think
I'm scared about what they'll do with Rocky.
It should be a series. It should be a series. There's enough in it.
It did a good job on The Martian. I'm going to let them have the something or other doubt. Too much vodka. Sorry.
Benefit of the doubt.
Thank you. Benefit of the doubt, for the simple reason that you've got to admit that the Martian movie is one of the better adaptations that we've had in years.
It is. My concern is it's because Rocky's going to have to be probably CG.
Yeah.
It's really going to hinge on how well that comes off. It's either going to be really fun and great, or it's going to come off as really silly. And I'm not sure.
Get the actor who did Gollum, and then it will be good, because he's very good at his CGI monsters.
He's getting on a bit though.
Andy
He's doing what?
Serkis. Yeah.
Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
What's he doing?
He's just getting on a bit.
Oh, is it?
It's a very physical job.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Not spring chicken anymore.
They'll just get Benedict Cumberbatch in instead. It'll be fine.
Oh my God. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Didn't you say penguin?
I just think with everything, because the Martian was a good adaptation, but I think like having re-listened to it recently, the thing that gets dropped off, which is one of the things I really love about The Martian and I enjoyed about this, is the other characters that you get to meet along the way, and that kind of has to, because you've got like, I have 2 hours to tell a story, and it's really about this guy, and it's not about all these other people that kind of they don't have the time to kind of go into it. But that's one of the things I really enjoyed about the story. I was meeting all those other people along the way, and of course Rocky, who it deserves
To be fair, most of those scenes with those side characters were actually quite short. You got so many of them.
Yeah, they were
It was really about how big their personalities was, more so than getting to really get to know them.
Yeah. I'm not saying it has to be a 6-part or 24-part series, but I just think that, like the Brits do it really well. They take things and they make like a 3-part special, 90 minutes each episode. Well, Sherlock Holmes was always that, right? Sherlock Holmes was always like a 2 or 3. Yeah.
They deliberately scheduled it to be movie-length episodes, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that, and the fact is, I don't know when people are going to the theaters again, or if anybody even wants to. People love series. Just saying.
I'm not disputing that it would possibly be quite better if they did that. I just don't know how viable it is, because financial backing for those sorts of things can be a bit iffy, as opposed to movies, especially movies that already had a blockbuster success, are more likely to get the backing that's needed.
True, but we are in different times now, and they're not getting greenlit. So that's interesting. So
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Who would be a good actress to play Strat?
Oh, I've been looking at this because I've been looking at Dutch people who I think might be good. Because I think it would be good for it to be a Dutch person, but if it wasn't, I have Olivia Colman in my head. I think she could be good.
Olivia Colman is quite versatile as an actress.
Queen Elizabeth in the most recent series of the Queen.
Oh, okay.
Amongst other things.
Yeah, amongst all of other bits and pieces.
A lot of other things.
Yeah.
My father's.
She was also in what's the thing? The Favourite. She played the queen in that. She plays lots of queens.
She's very good at, but see, the thing is I think she's very good at emotional scenes. Strat doesn't really do any emotional scenes.
It's got to be someone really ruthless, like someone who can play as that. I mean, like, I'm thinking someone like, but I don't know if she's young enough anymore, but Jodie Foster.
Yeah, I was thinking of Jodie Foster.
She would be, should be good, but she's, not quite the right age.
I was thinking Charlize Theron.
Too attractive, but.
Fair point. But she's unattractive. She's not just clean attractive.
Perhaps this is a thing to be pondered further at a later time.
Yeah, true. Indeed.
I was just wondering.
We have been going for an hour and a half, guys. Are we wrapping up? Are we good?
No, we are not done. We have not talked about the last scene.
Indeed, that is a good point. Yes, I had many thoughts on that.
I liked it, but mostly I was just happy he wasn't going back to Earth.
Yeah.
Because you can't go, he could never go back. I was like, you can't go back. You're not going back to the way it was, only forward.
I want to know what happened on Earth, and that was annoying to me.
But that's why you can't go back, because the story's not about Earth.
But I did like that he went back to teaching, and I did like that, because it shits me when, and it's something that happens a lot in fiction, where it's like the teaching role is seen as the loser role, and then the teacher can do something else that's better than teaching. And I liked that he kind of enjoyed being a teacher, and he went back to being a teacher, even though he was teaching aliens.
Yeah, but it was
Iridians.
It was a really useful thing that he was doing too, because he was sharing knowledge with them that they wouldn't necessarily have come across because of their entire situation. Because he was I think his thinking was like, you're probably going to meet up with humans at some point. Maybe I try and give you as much.
Because you're going to live for 600 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of time he would be teaching them, it would be like so minuscule in their lifespan.
It would be like going to just a one-off lecture that just was interesting, and then that's it.
Pretty much.
But
hopefully creating an
I
awareness.
did like that it wasn't just like, because there was an implication earlier on that basically you took teaching because it's the easy route, because you were too afraid, because your paper wasn't received the way you wanted it to. And Strat basically says this to him.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off, because it's like, teaching is not the easy way out, and it's a fucking difficult job. And he
was freaking good at it. It was not clear.
I do not like this mentality of those who can't do teach.
But that was also the mentality of everybody else. The moment it kept coming up, like, junior high school teacher, and they would all exchange looks, because they all had that opinion. Everybody else had that opinion. But the fact was, he quotes as saying, and I left academia and then started enjoying my life. He didn't like what he was doing. That's the place of respect and all this. He's like, I went off and did this, and I liked this, So,
and it bothered me that was kind of seen as the coward's way out, because that was when she called him a coward for not wanting to go. She brought up the teaching thing, and I was like,
but in fairness, he just held the kids up as some shield.
And that pissed me off. I did not like that, because it was like, well, the whole point of you going out there and fixing the world is for those kids. And that annoyed me. But I liked that he went back to teaching. Did I think it was cheesy and not very realistic? Yes, but I didn't care. And I'm like, what was the gravity on that planet again? Because
2.
Even if he's in a box where it's not the same atmospheric pressure and it's not the same atmosphere and everything, it's still, the gravity's still worse than that sounds like a little bit fun.
What did others say?
I had to switch certain parts of my brain off, and then it was really good.
Can someone remind me, when he sent the Beatles back to Earth, did he send the details about him having met the Iridian, met Rocky, but knowing of Iridians and everything?
He doesn't say.
Yeah, he was taking lots of notes, and he sent that with it. That's why he was taking so many notes. So when Rocky ate and pooed, he hurried back to take all the, like he was
I remember
journaling
that.
everything.
I just don't remember him mentioning when he sent it, that he included all of that.
I don't think
I
he
don't think
said.
it was specifically mentioned. I would think it
Yeah.
was strange
Assumed.
not to, but
Yeah.
See, so that's the thing that I found a bit odd about the ending. Like, I was actually fine with pretty much everything about the ending. I mean, obviously there's some science elements that we've just sort of ignored, i.e. the pressure and all of that. But the thing that I was sort of like, they have this technology of beetles now. They know where he's gone. Why didn't they send a beetle with any sort of information at all to him, or make some sort of contact with the Iridians?
Because he had
you
already
don't know what the Earth is like.
he had already sent the Beatles when he went after Rocky.
No, I
So
meant
he
from
didn't say
Earth.
where he
After
was
they
going.
received the Beatles, they've saved the Earth, and it's been 16
Oh,
years.
why did they send something off to Eric to say, hi, it's us?
Yeah.
You
Well,
might remember us from that guy called Ryland Grace.
Maybe
Yeah.
they did, but they
What-
probably wouldn't arrive till after he died.
And also, like, what's
Beatles
Earth
would
like?
able to
Have they
travel
got the
much
capability
faster.
for space travel anymore after all the whatever's been going on when people
I mean,
find
there's a lot of possibilities, but to me, it didn't seem that big of a leap, given that they were able to actually save the Earth and send something out to Venus to do that. That to send a beetle, which is just small and easily powered, given the astrophage.
There might be one coming. I mean, they probably had to put it all together, and I don't know, maybe it was still on its way. Who knows?
Elizabeth,
Like-
were you trying to say something?
No, don't worry about it. Mel still has a point that, like, even though the speed of light means that we've only just seen that the Earth is rescued, the beetle might have been able to arrive before then, or did they not travel faster?
The
than
beetle
speed
was
of
the
light?
beetle.
No,
the
they're
Beatles
slower
were
than
They're still,
light.
I think
Yeah.
they said they got to about 0.9 C. So
Okay, so not faster than the speed of light. So
No,
it
no.
would still be on its way then, yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they'd only just seen that our sun had stopped dimming, had gone back to its previous brightness. So they've only just.
But that's when the sun had recovered. They could have still
Recovered.
sent the beetle before then, and the beetles were able to travel much faster because they didn't have to worry about the G pressure on a human being on the inside, which was the whole point of them
Yes,
being able to
but
get back before
it's still
him.
less
Like,
than the speed
it's
of
still
light.
less
It was
than
still
light,
less than the
so-
speed of light.
I get
and the
that, but
light
I'm
from the
saying
sun.
they didn't have to wait for the sun to be fixed for them to send the beetle.
Why would
could-
they spend resources to send this one dude a message that?
Oh,
when
no, it
they-
wasn't
Because
the
it's
dude.
not
I
that
think
much of a
Mel-
resource.
important.
Yeah.
It's
I
a
think Mel's
beetle, it's
saying
not
that they
much.
could reach out to Erin just to kind of say, hey, neighbours,
Yeah.
we've heard about you. We'd like to start a chat. Yeah,
Let's do a Zoom meeting
inconvenient storytelling.
I don't, look, honestly, it's not a big deal to me. I think that that's just what I wanted for a little bit more resolution. I didn't necessarily need to know everything about where Earth was gone, but some sort of acknowledgement of what he'd done and something like that would have been
Yeah.
nice.
I wanted to know more
Yeah.
about what's going on. The other thing I meant to mention before when we were talking about Ryland Grace's shortcomings, the first time I listened to it, I was actually screaming. I was so cranky. Was Rocky had been like, watch me sleep, and Ryland was like, I'm just gonna go and do some shit. And I was like, you fucking watch him sleep. He's been by himself for 40 years. And I was actually really worried that Rocky was gonna wake up and Ryland wasn't gonna be there. And then that was gonna be a conflict, because I really didn't want there to be. I really like it in stories when the conflict is external to, like, I like that the characters when they don't have a fight and it's not about, like, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was waiting. I was like, he's going to wake up and then it's going to be a big conflict about why, like, it's this huge taboo that you would never walk away from someone when they're sleeping, and he's done it and he knew he shouldn't have. And I was so fucking mad at him. I'm like, it's not that long. Just let him sleep. Watch him sleep. Bring something with you like he did for you, and just made me mad. But I was like, I at first was like, Rocky's gonna turn on him now. The first time I watched and read it, because I was just so cranky with him for knowing how important that was, and then going, yeah, but I've got stuff to do. I'll be back before he wakes up. I'm like, no, what if he wakes up when you're gone?
I actually kind of wanted a little more conflict, not in between the two of them. Not because, not a big argument, nothing serious or that, but I do feel like one of the things, like, I don't get me wrong, absolutely love Rocky, adore him, but he was slightly infantile. Can someone say the word for me, please?
Infantilized.
Thank you. In how with the way the language was translated and things like that. It's not to say that he was. It's that that's sort of how it sort of came across a little bit, and a little bit of conflict would have sort of scrape that away a little bit. I think you got it at the end where he did not feel like an infant at all at that ending scene. And I was like, yes, thank you. You finally got it right. I like it.
Okay. I just remembered something else I forgot to ask everybody about. The naming of the planet of Adrian.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I laughed. And that's why I wonder if he, the whole giving Rocky a male name, if that was because the whole Hail Mary full of grace was completely something he did on purpose.
I had to explain that to Matt because he was like, what? I don't get it.
Yeah,
like,
someone
man,
said, oh, is it on purpose? He says it was completely on purpose. So I was like, I wondered if that was the whole Rocky and the planet Adrian. I was like, yeah, which I kept calling this book, Ryland and Rocky to Adrian.
Oh.
Because I kept going, they're off to the planet, let's find out what happens. So I was going to say, I felt it's interesting that I thought that was actually covered okay by some of the evolution discussions they had, Mel, where Ryland would ask questions and Rocky would have very good, like where he's saying, why do we hear the same frequencies? And Rocky would explain because of predators. And so I felt like a lot of those discussions resolve that kind of,
I'm not saying that he wasn't presented as smart. It was more in his behaviors and things along those lines around things. It's fucking Sheldon on the Big Bang Theory all over again. It doesn't mean that he's not intelligent. It's just that they present certain elements that make him appealing because he feels young and like an infant and things along those lines. That's
which is interesting because I've been watching the Big Bang Theory and God, I hate Sheldon. It's so objectionable, and Rocky's a dream. Like Rocky has emotion and cares about his friends.
But it's the same sort of thing where he gets infantile. Why this word?
Because you've had vodka. You've had liquid for celebration.
I have liquid for celebration, the vodka. So that word, which apparently I cannot wrap my tongue around tonight. There's a similar sort of thing, but not in the same way that happens with Sheldon in that show. And it's not about his intelligence. It's about how people treat him. It's about how he behaves on occasion, that sort of thing. And that's what I felt like came from this. But instead of it being annoying and selfish, in this case, it came across as sweet and innocent, which makes you attached to him a little bit easier.
Well, it worked for me because I was just.
It did for me too. I
not saying it didn't.
I wanted to ask if the scene where others cried was the bit where Ryland was banging on the hole and Rocky answers. Yeah,
I cried in that. I cried when they said goodbye to each other. Even the second time when I knew that it wasn't actually goodbye, I still cried my eyes out, and I don't like. And then him go just. Yep, it got me.
Which is, I suppose, why the ending is the good ending, because it's like you're left with this feeling of no, they can't separate.
And I did think it was nice that you got that change in his character where he did find something that he knew he was giving up his life. And I think maybe we talked before about how before he didn't really have a choice, whereas going back to Rocky was his choice, and it was only his choice. He didn't have to do that. Nobody was going to make him do that. He could have gone back to Earth and just lived and not, but it was his choice to do that. But yeah, I liked that change where he actually did go, and he thought that he was going to die from going back to Rocky, but he did it anyway.
Yeah.
But that was, I really liked that.
Okay. We got to the end. We lost people along the way, just like this movie. I mean, book. Okay.
So Karina needed to step out. 8:30 is Aurelia's bedtime, and she can't stay after that. So she's really upset she didn't really get to talk to you guys about the book.
Yeah,
It's
a bit of a
okay.
problem.
Aurelia sleeps, she observes.
No, she couldn't even stay. Like, she literally had to leave. She hasn't listened to any of the talk. She hasn't talked to anyone about the book. She's really upset that she missed out on all the talk because she's been hanging out for this book all week. And yeah.
Well, I hope that she can maybe enjoy the video and that she will hit us up in the chat at a later time when she's free.
And
I would
as
certainly
well.
like to hear her thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Karina, watch the video and then come and talk to us about all the things that we said.
Please.
I've done it before where I've rewatched the video and I'm like yelling at the TV and going, oh, that's right, you can't hear me.
All the time. All the
All the
time.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just with Aurelia, 8 o'clock's too late to start. So it's just a too late start. Unless she gets to talk first, it's just too late to start.
Yeah.
Well, 9 here. So, and it'll be 8 next month. Is it next month we go back, Mel?
No,
Let me check the calendar. I don't think so. I think it's
month
May.
after. Daylight savings ends the first week of April, weekend of April.
Yeah, so it's
Right.
April.
So it's
Yeah,
still-
so NPCs will be the first official, like, full pick that is starting at 8. But it's not going to change the time so much for Queensland because it's still 8 for them.
Yeah.
Like, we can just maybe try and remember to have her share her thoughts first, because we know that she'll have to step out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, our next book is going to be quick, what's the title?
A Master of Gin.
Master of Gin by P. Jelly Clark, and that will be for March.
Yay, it's Elizabeth's pick. Yay. All right, guys. Night for everyone watching.
Night.